she whispered to the quiet stranger in the corner booth. Help. He keeps following me. The Mafia boss looked up from his coffee, eyes cold and calculating. What the waitress didn't know, she'd saved this man's life 6 months ago. And he never forgot a debt. The rain hammered against the windows of Sally's diner like it had a personal grudge. Clara Martinez wiped down the same spot on the counter for the 3rd time, her eyes darting to the glass door every few seconds. Outside, barely visible through the downpour and fog, a figure stood under the broken streetlight across the road. He'd been there for 2 hours. "Girl, you gonna scrub a hole through that counter?" Maggie called from the kitchen, her raspy smoker's voice cutting through the hum of the old jukebox. "We're closed. Go home." Clara's hand trembled as she wrung out the dishcloth. 5 more minutes. "You said that 20 minutes ago," Maggie emerged, untying her grease-stained apron. She was 63, built like a retired linebacker, and could spot trouble from a mile away. Her eyes followed Clara's gaze to the window. "That him again?" Clara nodded. "3rd night this week," Maggie's jaw tightened. "I'm calling the cops." "No," Clara's voice came out sharper than intended. "Last time they just
talked to him.
He said he was waiting for a bus. They believed him." "At midnight? In the rain?" Maggie snorted. Cops in this town couldn't find their own. The door chimed. Both women froze. A man stepped inside, water streaming from his black overcoat. He was tall, maybe 40, with silver threading through his dark hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from expensive marble, all sharp angles and controlled expressions. He moved with the kind of quiet confidence that made people nervous without knowing why. Lorenzo De Luca didn't look at either of them. He never did. He'd been coming to Sally's diner every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 3 months, always ordered the same thing, black coffee and whatever pie was left, always sat in the corner booth facing the door, and always left exactly $47 on the table. 30 for the meal and coffee he barely touched, 17 for the tip. Clara had looked him up once, curious about the generous stranger who never spoke. Google gave her nothing. No social media, no public records, nothing.
Like he didn't exist.
That should have been her first warning. "Evening," Maggie said, her protective instincts kicking in. "We were just closing up." "Coffee," Lorenzo said quietly, settling into his usual booth. His voice was smooth, cultured, with the faintest trace of a New York accent. "Please." Maggie looked at Clara, eyebrows raised in a silent question. "You want me to stay?" Clara shook her head. If the man outside was going to make a move, it wouldn't matter if Maggie was here or not. The older woman reluctantly grabbed her purse and headed for the back exit, leaving Clara alone with the only customer who'd ever made her feel safe without saying more than 10 words. She poured the coffee with shaking hands, her mind racing. Through the window, she could see the hooded figure still watching, waiting. This was insane. She didn't know Lorenzo De Luca. Didn't know if he'd help or walk away or laugh at her desperation. But something in the way he carried himself, the way his eyes constantly scanned the room like a Secret Service agent, told her he wasn't an ordinary man. And desperate times called for desperate measures. Clara carried the coffee to his table, set it down, and then did something she'd never done before. She slid into the booth across from him. Lorenzo's dark eyes lifted from his phone, surprise flickering across his features for just a moment before his expression returned to its usual careful neutrality. "I'm sorry," Clara whispered, leaning forward. Her heart pounded so hard, she was sure he could hear it. "I know this is crazy, and you don't know me, but—" Her voice cracked.
"Help. Please."
"He keeps following me." She watched Lorenzo's gaze shift past her shoulder to the window. Something changed in his face, not fear, not anger, but a cold calculation that made her shiver. "The man across the street," he said. It wasn't a question.
"Yes."
"For 3 nights now. He followed me from the bus stop. He knows where I work. I think he knows where I live." The words tumbled out in a rush. The police won't do anything until he actually does something, and I can't afford to move, and I don't have anyone who can. Breathe, Lorenzo said softly. Clara sucked in air, realizing she'd been holding her breath. Lorenzo pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. Within seconds, the door chimed again. A massive man in a dark suit entered, easily 6'5", built like a professional bodybuilder, with a face that suggested he ate nails for breakfast. He didn't acknowledge Clara's existence. Boss. Tony, Lorenzo said calmly, never taking his eyes off Clara. The man across the street. Gray hoodie, black jeans. Follow him. I want to know everywhere he goes, everyone he talks to, and who's paying him. Paying him? Clara's blood ran cold. She thought maybe he was just some creep, some stalker with too much time on his hands. But Lorenzo made it sound professional. Deliberate. Tony nodded once and disappeared into the storm. Lorenzo finally looked directly at Clara, and she felt the full weight of his attention like a physical thing. Go inside. Lock the door. Don't leave until I tell you it's safe. I don't understand. Why would someone... Clara. She froze. She'd never told him her name. It was on her name tag, sure, but he'd never looked at it. Never looked at her. Trust me, Lorenzo said, his voice carrying a strange gentleness that didn't match the intensity in his eyes. Lock the door. She wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Instead, she found herself nodding, sliding out of the booth on trembling legs. She locked the front door, flipped the sign to closed, and turned off the exterior lights. Through the rain-streaked window, she watched Lorenzo sit perfectly still, sipping his coffee like he had all the time in the world. Like there wasn't a stalker across the street. Like he hadn't just dispatched a small mountain of a man into the storm on her behalf. Who was he? Clara's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Stay away from the windows.
Elle.
She looked up. Lorenzo was watching her now, phone in hand. He nodded once, then gestured toward the kitchen. Clara backed away from the glass, her mind reeling. Across the street, the hooded figure shifted nervously, finally noticing that something had changed. He started walking, not toward the diner, but away from it, quickly, looking over his shoulder. Running. But Tony was already behind him, a shadow in the rain, closing the distance with frightening speed. Clara's legs gave out. She sank onto a stool behind the counter, her whole body shaking. This was real. This was happening. And somehow, the quiet stranger who came for coffee twice a week had just saved her life without even standing up. Who are you, Lorenzo De Luca? And more terrifyingly, why did you already know my name? The rain had softened to a drizzle by the time Lorenzo's phone buzzed. Clara watched from behind the counter as he read the message, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, buttoning his coat with careful precision. He's gone, Lorenzo said, walking toward the counter. Tony will make sure he doesn't come back tonight. Clara's hands were still shaking as she gripped the edge of the formica. Who was he? Why was he? I don't know yet. Lorenzo's eyes met hers, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. Not menacing, but searching, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. But I'll find out. Why are you helping me? The question came out as barely a whisper. Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. It was slight, almost sad, and it transformed his entire face from intimidating to human. Because someone once helped me when I needed it most, he said. Coffee. Clara blinked, thrown by the sudden shift. You want more coffee?
No.
I'm offering to make you some. You look like you need it. Before she could respond, Lorenzo moved behind the counter with the ease of someone comfortable in any space. He found a clean mug, poured coffee from the pot she'd made an hour ago, and slid it toward her.
Sit, he said gently.
You've had a shock. Clara sat, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. The absurdity of the situation hit her. A stranger she barely knew had just orchestrated some kind of military operation outside her workplace, and now he was making her coffee in her own diner. I should pay you, she said suddenly.
4.
Whatever you just did. I don't have much, but I can. No, Lorenzo's voice was firm, but not unkind. You owe me nothing. He settled onto the stool beside her, not across the counter like a customer, but next to her like an equal. This close, Clara could see the faint scar along his jawline, the tiredness around his eyes that expensive suits couldn't hide. You've been coming here for months, Clara said. But you never really looked at me before tonight. Until you knew my name. Something flickered across Lorenzo's face. Recognition? Regret. I've always noticed you, he said quietly. I just wasn't sure if you remembered me. Clara's heart skipped. Remembered you? We've never. And then it hit her. The memory came rushing back like a wave. 6 months ago, Route 17, the horrible sound of metal crunching, tires screaming. She'd been driving home from her evening shift when she'd seen the black Mercedes slam into the guardrail, flip once, and crash into the embankment. She'd pulled over without thinking, called 911, and run to the wreck. The driver had been conscious, trapped, blood running down his face. She'd talked to him, kept him awake until the ambulance arrived, held his hand through the broken window. Oh my God, Clara breathed. That was you. Lorenzo nodded slowly. You saved my life that night, but you looked so different. The blood, the dark, I couldn't see. Clara's mind raced. The paramedics said you were being taken to St. Mary's. I tried to visit the next day, but they said no one by that name was admitted. They took me somewhere else, Lorenzo said carefully. Somewhere private. Clara studied his face, really seeing him for the first time. Yes, there it was. The same sharp cheekbones, the same intense eyes. But that night they'd been filled with pain and vulnerability. Now they were guarded, controlled. You never tried to find me, she said. To say thank you. I did find you, Lorenzo's voice was soft. That's why I come here. I wanted to make sure you were safe. Safe from what? Lorenzo turned his coffee mug in slow circles, choosing his words carefully. That accident wasn't an accident, Clara. Someone cut my brake lines. And when you pulled over to help me, when you gave your name to the police report, he paused. You became visible to people who should never have known you existed. The diner suddenly felt very cold. Are you saying? Clara's voice cracked. That man outside, he was there because of you. I'm saying I don't know yet. But I'm going to find out. Lorenzo reached into his coat and pulled out a business card. It was black, expensive looking, with only a phone number embossed in silver. If anything happens, anything at all, you call this number. Day or night. Clara took the card with numb fingers.
Who are you?
Really? Someone who pays his debts, Lorenzo said, standing. He pulled out his wallet and placed 2 crisp $50 bills on the counter. That's too much. It's not enough. Lorenzo headed for the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. Clara? That night on Route 17, when you held my hand through the window. Do you remember what you said to me?
Clara thought back.
She'd been terrified, talking just to keep him conscious. I think I said, don't you dare die on me. Not tonight. Lorenzo smiled again. That same sad smile. You also said, someone's waiting for you to come home. They need you to fight. Do you remember that? She did now. I was just trying to keep you awake. I didn't know if. My daughter, Lorenzo interrupted quietly. Sophia. She's 8. She'd just lost her mother the year before. His voice grew rough. You were right. She needed me to fight. So I did. Before Clara could respond, he opened the door and stepped into the drizzle. A black SUV materialized from the darkness, and Lorenzo climbed into the back seat. The vehicle disappeared into the night, leaving Clara alone with cold coffee, a mysterious phone number, and the terrifying realization that 6 months ago, when she'd stopped to help a stranger, she'd accidentally stepped into a world she didn't understand. A world that was now following her home. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. The man's name is Marcus Webb, former private investigator. Someone hired him to watch you 3 weeks ago. We're finding out who. Sleep with your doors locked. Tony will be outside your building tonight. You won't see him, but he'll be there. L. Clara stared at the message until her vision blurred. 3 weeks. The stalker had been watching her for 3 weeks, and she'd only noticed 3 days ago. What else hadn't she noticed? Lorenzo didn't sleep that night. In his penthouse office overlooking the harbor, he stood before a wall of monitors while his security team assembled the pieces of a puzzle he'd hoped would never materialize. Tony stood beside him, arms crossed, his massive frame casting shadows across the screens. Marcus Webb, Tony said, pulling up a file. 42, ex-cop turned private investigator. Lost his badge in Dallas 8 years ago for taking bribes. Been doing freelance surveillance work ever since, divorces, insurance fraud, the usual bottom-feeder stuff. Who hired him? Lorenzo's voice was ice. That's where it gets interesting, boss. Tony tapped a screen, bringing up a series of encrypted messages. He's been communicating through a secure app, the kind drug dealers use. His employer is listed only as collector. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. The collector. He knew exactly who that was. Vincent Russo, a rival who'd been circling Lorenzo's legitimate business holdings for years, looking for any crack in the armor. Russo dealt in information, blackmail, and financial leverage. He collected secrets the way other men collected art. What was Webb's assignment? Lorenzo asked. Tony pulled up another screen, surveillance photos. Lorenzo's blood ran cold. They were all of Clara. Clara leaving the diner. Clara at the grocery store. Clara at the laundromat. Clara getting on the bus. Dozens of photos spanning 3 weeks, each one time-stamped and cataloged with disturbing precision. There's more, Tony said grimly. He opened another file. Webb was specifically instructed to document anyone Clara spoke with, anywhere she went, and he paused. Any connection she might have to you. To me specifically? Lorenzo's mind raced. Pull up the hospital records for my accident. The police report. Everything. Tony's fingers flew across the keyboard. Moments later, the report appeared on screen. And there it was, Clara's name, her phone number, her statement to the police. All part of the public record. But that wasn't what made Lorenzo's blood freeze. At the bottom of the file was a hospital security photo, time-stamped from that night. It showed Clara beside the ambulance, her hand resting on Lorenzo's shoulder as paramedics loaded him onto a stretcher. Someone had circled her face in red and written a single word in the margin: leverage. They've been watching her since the accident, Lorenzo said quietly. They knew she helped me. They've been waiting to see if she was important enough to use. And now Webb's been following her for 3 weeks, Tony added. Which means someone decided she is important enough. Lorenzo slammed his fist on the desk. Russo is looking for my offshore accounts. He thinks if he can find someone close to me, he can extract information. But Clara doesn't know anything about your business. It doesn't matter. Russo doesn't know that Lorenzo's mind worked through the implications. He sees a woman who saved my life, a woman I've been visiting regularly for months. To him, that's a connection worth exploiting. Tony pulled up another file. There's something else, boss. Webb's encrypted messages reference a secondary objective. He was told to gain access to Clara's apartment. Lorenzo spun around. When? Tomorrow night. He's supposed to copy her laptop hard drive and photograph any documents, bank statements, letters, anything that might connect her to you or your businesses. Double the security on her building, Lorenzo ordered. I want eyes on every entrance, every window. If Webb so much as walks past her block. Already done, Tony said. But boss, there's a problem. We can't keep this kind of surveillance up indefinitely without drawing attention. And if Russo realizes we're protecting her, it just confirms his theory that she's valuable to you. Lorenzo stared at the photo of Clara on the screen, exhausted, vulnerable, completely unaware that her simple act of kindness 6 months ago had painted a target on her back. Pull Webb's financial records, Lorenzo said. I want to know who else he's worked for, who he banks with, where he eats breakfast. Everything. On it, Tony paused. What about the girl? Are you going to tell her the truth? About who you are, what you do? No, Lorenzo said firmly. The less she knows, the safer she is. With all due respect, boss, I think that ship has sailed. Webb's been photographing her for 3 weeks. Russo already considers her part of your world. Lorenzo closed his eyes.
Tony was right.
By trying to protect Clara from a distance, by coming to her diner to make sure she was safe, he'd inadvertently confirmed exactly what Russo suspected, that she mattered to him. Find out everything about Russo's operation, Lorenzo said. His communication networks, his financial pipelines, his protection. I want to know every person he's paying, every account he's using. Tony nodded slowly. You're going after him. He made this personal when he targeted her. Lorenzo's voice dropped to something dangerous. I'm going to make him regret it. What about Clara? Lorenzo looked at the surveillance photos again. In one, she was laughing at something, her face bright despite her obvious exhaustion. In another, she was counting coins from her tip jar, trying to make ends meet. In another, she was simply walking, head down, trying to be invisible. She'd saved his life, without asking for anything in return. She'd given him hope on the worst night of his existence, reminded him that Sophia needed him to survive. And now she was in danger because of him. Watch her, Lorenzo said quietly. Every moment. And Tony, make sure she never sees you. If Clara realizes how deep this goes, if she understands what kind of world she's stumbled into, he trailed off. She'll run, Tony finished. Or worse, Lorenzo said. She'll think she can handle it alone. Tony headed for the door, then stopped. Boss, that thing you said about paying your debts, you know this is bigger than that now, right? Lorenzo didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew the truth. This stopped being about debt the moment he'd read her name on that hospital report. The moment he'd started coming to her diner twice a week, just to make sure she was safe. The moment he'd realized that Clara Martinez, a waitress who couldn't afford to move apartments, who worked double shifts and still smiled at customers, had become the one weakness his enemies could exploit. And in his world, weakness got people killed. Clara showed up for her morning shift still exhausted from the night before. She'd barely slept, jumping at every sound in her apartment, checking the locks on her door 3 times before finally collapsing into bed around 4 a.m. True to Lorenzo's word, nothing had happened. No strange sounds, no shadows at her window, no Marcus Webb lurking outside. But that almost made it worse, the not knowing, the waiting for the other shoe to drop. You look like hell, Maggie said cheerfully, pouring her a cup of coffee. Rough night. You could say that. Clara tied on her apron and tried to focus on the morning routine. Refill salt shakers. Check the pie case. Smile at customers. Pretend everything was normal. But nothing was normal anymore. Around noon, during the lunch rush, Maggie pulled her aside near the kitchen. Hey, weird question. Did you ever figure out that thing with the rent? Clara frowned. What thing? You know, how Murphy suddenly stopped breathing down your neck about being late. Maggie wiped her hands on her apron. 3 months ago, you were sweating bullets about getting evicted. Then nothing. I figured you worked something out with him. Clara's stomach dropped. I didn't work anything out. He just stopped asking. Well, somebody did something. Maggie shrugged. Maybe he finally grew a heart. Their landlord, Jim Murphy, was a shark in a cheap suit who'd never grown a heart in his entire miserable life. He charged too much for too little and threatened eviction at the slightest delay. Clara had been late twice last year, and he'd taped eviction notices to her door both times. Bright orange papers designed to humiliate. But Maggie was right. 3 months ago, Murphy had suddenly stopped hounding her. Stopped the threatening calls, stopped the notices. She'd been so relieved she hadn't questioned it. 3 months ago, right around the time Lorenzo De Luca had started coming to the diner. I need to make a call, Clara said, already untying her apron. Now? We're slammed. 5 minutes. Please, Maggie. She ducked into the back office, a cramped space that smelled like old receipts and burnt coffee. Her hands shook as she dialed Murphy's number. He answered on the 3rd ring. Yeah. Mr. Murphy, it's Clara Martinez. From 4B. What do you want? His usual charm. I wanted to ask about my rent. You haven't been cashing my checks for the past 3 months. That's because they're no good, Murphy said. Account's been paid in full by the property investor. Clara's heart hammered. What property investor? How should I know? Some holding company bought out half the building 6 months ago. They've been covering certain tenants directly. You're one of the lucky ones. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. What's the name of the company? Murphy sighed like she was wasting his precious time. Hang on, she heard papers rustling. Here it is. De Luca Holdings, LLC.
Why?
The phone nearly slipped from Clara's hand. Hello? You still there? Yeah, Clara managed. Thanks. She hung up and stared at the wall, her mind reeling. Lorenzo hadn't just been watching over her. He'd been paying her rent. For 3 months. Behind her back. That son of a bitch, she whispered. The lunch shift dragged by in a blur. Clara smiled mechanically at customers, took orders, delivered food, but inside, she was boiling. Every kind gesture, every quiet moment sitting in his booth, every time he looked at her with those sad, knowing eyes, it had all been a lie. Or worse, pity. She didn't need his charity, didn't want his money. She'd survived just fine before Lorenzo de Luca crashed his car and decided to play guardian angel. By closing time, her anger had crystallized into something sharp and focused. When the last customer left and Maggie headed home, Clara stayed behind, cleaning tables she'd already cleaned, waiting. At 8:47 p.m., right on schedule, Lorenzo walked through the door. He looked tired, more tired than usual. His suit was still perfect, his expression still controlled, but there were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. Clara, he said, offering that slight smile. Coffee. Sit down, Clara said flatly. Lorenzo's smile faded. He slid into his usual booth, watching her with careful attention. Clara walked over and dropped a stack of papers onto the table. Every rent check from the past 3 months, returned by Murphy that afternoon, marked account paid in full. You want to explain this? Her voice shook with barely controlled fury. Lorenzo looked at the checks, then back at her. I can explain. You've been paying for my life behind my back, Clara's hands clenched into fists. 3 months of rent. How much was it? 5,000? 6? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. The words exploded out of her. I'm not some charity case you get to rescue because you feel guilty about a car accident. I don't need you to save me, Lorenzo. I was doing fine on my own. Were you? Lorenzo's voice was quiet but sharp. You were 3 weeks from eviction when I stepped in. You were working 70-hour weeks and still couldn't make rent. That's not fine, Clara. That's drowning. That was my choice. My life. Clara felt tears burning her eyes and hated herself for it. You had no right. I had every right, Lorenzo stood, his composure cracking for the first time. You saved my life. You kept me alive for Sophia. And when I found out you were struggling, when I saw you working yourself to death in this place, he gestured around the shabby diner. What was I supposed to do? Nothing.
Yes.
Nothing. That's exactly what you were supposed to do. Clara's voice broke. Because now I'm in your debt, and I can't pay you back, and that man was following me because of you, and... She stopped. Lorenzo's expression had gone very still. What did you say? He asked carefully. That man. Marcus Webb. He was following me because of you, wasn't he? Because I pulled you out of that car. Because I became... What did you call it? Visible. The pieces were clicking together now, ugly and sharp. You didn't pay my rent out of kindness. You did it because you felt responsible. Because saving your life put me in danger. Lorenzo said nothing, which was answer enough. Oh my God, Clara breathed. That's why you kept coming here.
Not to check on me.
To protect me. From threats I didn't even know existed, she laughed bitterly. And paying my rent, that wasn't generosity. That was insurance. Keep me stable, keep me in one place, make me easier to watch. That's not. Lorenzo started. Get out, Clara said coldly. Clara, you need to understand. Get out of my diner, her voice was steel now. Take your money, take your guilt, and leave me alone. Lorenzo stared at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, placing it carefully on the table. That's a cashier's check for $18,000, he said quietly. 3 months of rent, plus interest, plus compensation for the invasion of your privacy. Consider us even. He walked toward the door, then paused. But Clara? The danger doesn't disappear because you're angry at me. Marcus Webb works for someone who wants to hurt me by hurting people I care about. Whether you like it or not, you're on that list now. I never asked to be on any list. No, Lorenzo agreed softly. You didn't. But you became one of the few good things in my world the night you held my hand and told me to fight. And I'm sorry, but I can't just walk away from that. He left, the door chiming softly behind him. Clara stood alone in the empty diner, staring at the envelope on the table.
$18,000.
More money than she'd seen in her entire life. She picked it up slowly, then walked to the garbage can and held it over the trash. Her hand wouldn't move. I'm drowning, she realized.
He's right.
I'm drowning, and I've been drowning for so long, I forgot what breathing felt like. But taking his money meant accepting his world. And his world had stalkers and danger and secrets that got people killed. Clara stood there for a long time, envelope in hand, trying to decide which scared her more, staying in her safe, suffocating life, or stepping into whatever darkness Lorenzo de Luca carried with him. Finally, she put the envelope in her apron pocket. Not because she forgave him, but because drowning people don't get to be proud. Lorenzo sat in the back of his SUV, watching the diner's lights go dark. He could still see Clara's silhouette moving inside, could imagine the war playing out of her head. Part of him wanted to go back, to explain everything properly. But Tony's words echoed in his mind. The less she knows, the safer she is. Except she wasn't safe. Not anymore. Boss, Tony's voice crackled through the phone. Webb's on the move. Lorenzo's attention snapped into focus. Where? Just left his apartment in Queens. He's heading toward Manhattan. We're on him.
Don't lose him, Lorenzo said.
But don't spook him either. I want to see where he goes, who he talks to. Copy that. Lorenzo ended the call and stared out at the dark streets. Marcus Webb had gone quiet for exactly 1 day after Tony had chased him off. 1 day of lying low, probably reporting back to whoever hired him. And now he was moving again.
Good.
Lorenzo had spent 20 years building his legitimate business empire on one simple principle. Information was more valuable than action. Webb thought he was hunting. He didn't realize he'd become the prey. 30 minutes later, Lorenzo sat in a surveillance van 3 blocks from a shabby office building in Midtown. The van looked like a plumber's vehicle on the outside, logo, phone number, even fake rust spots. Inside, it was state-of-the-art technology. He went in 15 minutes ago, Tony said, pointing at a monitor showing thermal imaging. 3rd floor, office 304. He's meeting with someone. Can you get audio? Working on it, Tony adjusted several dials. A moment later, voices crackled through the speakers. Told you to be more careful. The voice was reedy, nervous. You got made. Some guy the size of a truck chased you off. It was one night, Webb's voice replied. I've been watching her for 3 weeks. One interruption doesn't mean. It means she's got protection. Which means Russo was right about her being connected to De Luca. Lorenzo's jaw tightened at the mention of his name. So, what's the play? Webb asked. Changed priorities. Russo wants the hard drive copy by Friday. Get into her apartment Thursday night while she's at work. She doesn't have security cameras, doesn't have an alarm system.
It'll be easy.
And if she comes home early?
Then you improvise a pause.
Russo's paying you 15 grand for this job, Webb. Don't screw it up. The conversation shifted to logistics, lockpicking techniques, exit routes, timing. Lorenzo listened to every word, his expression cold. We've got him, Tony said. Want me to grab Webb when he leaves? No, Lorenzo said slowly. I want you to let him go. Tony turned, surprised. Boss. Webb's small time. A hired hand. But that office. Lorenzo pointed at the screen. That's a front for Russo's accounting operation. The man he's talking to is probably Gerald Chun, Russo's money man. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. We're not just going to stop Webb. We're going to use him. Use him how? Russo wants information from Clara's apartment. So we're going to give it to him. Lorenzo pulled out his phone and made a call. Marco, I need you to build me a flash drive. Something that looks like personal files, photos, documents, maybe some banking statements. Nothing too interesting, but authentic enough to seem real. How real? Marco's voice came through, tinny but clear. Real enough that Russo won't suspect it's bait. But buried in the code, I want a virus. Something sophisticated. The kind that activates when the files are copied to another system and then starts sending location data, keystrokes, everything. A digital tracking beacon, Marco said. I can have it ready by tomorrow. Make it look used.
Worn.
Like it's been sitting in someone's junk drawer for months. Lorenzo glanced at Tony. We're going to plant it in Clara's apartment tomorrow night. When Webb breaks in Thursday, he'll find it and think he hit the jackpot. Tony grinned slowly. And when he delivers it to Russo's people, we'll have access to their entire network, Lorenzo finished. Communications, financial records, client lists, everything. That's brilliant, boss. But there's one problem. What? You need Clara's permission to plant evidence in her apartment. And based on how she looked at you earlier tonight, Tony trailed off meaningfully. Lorenzo was quiet for a moment. She doesn't need to know. Boss. I'll handle it. Lorenzo's voice was firm. Tomorrow morning, I'll have someone from a fake property management company call her. Building inspection, routine maintenance, something plausible. She'll let them in, they'll plant the drive in a desk drawer, and she'll never know it was there. Tony looked uncomfortable. You're using her as bait. Without telling her. I'm protecting her, Lorenzo corrected. If this works, we'll have everything we need to destroy Russo's operation. No more stalkers, no more surveillance, no more danger. She'll be safe, and she'll never have to know how much danger she was actually in. And if something goes wrong, Lorenzo's expression hardened. Nothing will go wrong. I'll have 6 men watching her apartment Thursday night. If Webb so much as looks at Clara wrong, they'll pull him out before he can blink. On the monitor, Webb emerged from the building and climbed into a beat-up Honda. Tony's surveillance team followed at a careful distance. Track him until he's home, then pull back, Lorenzo ordered. I don't want him paranoid. He needs to feel confident about Thursday. You really think Russo's going to fall for this? Vincent Russo has spent 5 years trying to find leverage against me, Lorenzo said. He's desperate, which makes him sloppy. When Webb shows up with files from Clara's apartment, files that suggest she's been helping me hide offshore accounts, Russo won't be able to resist. He'll plug that drive into his system personally. And then we own him. And then we destroy him. Lorenzo stood, ducking to avoid hitting his head on the van's low ceiling. Quietly. Completely. So that no one ever uses Clara Martinez as leverage against me again. Tony was quiet for a moment. You know, boss, for someone who claims he's just paying a debt, you're going to a lot of trouble for this waitress. Lorenzo didn't respond. He didn't need to. They both knew this had stopped being about debt the moment he'd watched Clara work double shifts through the diner window, the moment he'd seen her counting coins from her tip jar, the moment he'd realized she was drowning in the same world that had drowned him, just in different waters. She'd given him hope when he had none, reminded him that Sophia needed him to survive. Now it was his turn to make sure Clara survived. Even if she never forgave him for it. Get Marco started on that drive, Lorenzo said. And Tony? Put 2 extra men on Clara's building tonight. I don't trust Russo to wait until Thursday. Already done, boss. Lorenzo climbed out of the van into the cold night air. Somewhere across the city, Clara was probably still awake, probably still angry, probably still clutching that envelope and hating him for it. Good. Let her hate him. As long as she stayed alive. 48 hours later, Lorenzo stood in his office watching 3 monitors simultaneously. On the first screen, Marcus Webb jimmied open Clara's apartment window. On the second, thermal imaging showed Webb moving through her living room. On the third, a live feed from the apartment across the hall showed Tony and 2 other men, weapons ready, waiting for Lorenzo's signal. Everything was going according to plan. "He's in the bedroom now," Marco reported through the earpiece, searching the desk drawers. Lorenzo watched Webb's heat signature pause, reach for something, then pause again. Even through thermal imaging, Lorenzo could sense the moment Webb found the flash drive, that slight hesitation, the careful way he examined it before pocketing it. "Got it." Webb's voice crackled through the bug they'd planted in Clara's apartment that morning. He was on the phone. "Looks like personal files. Photos, some documents. Could be nothing, could be everything." "Bring it straight here," Gerald Chen's voice responded. "Russo wants to see it tonight." Webb slipped back out the window and disappeared into the night. Tony's team stayed hidden, letting him go. "Phase 1 complete," Lorenzo said calmly. "Marco, how long until the virus activates?" "The moment they plug it into any computer connected to their network. Could be 10 minutes, could be an hour. Depends on their security protocols." Lorenzo checked his watch. 11:47 p.m. Clara's shift ended at midnight. She'd be home in 40 minutes, completely unaware that her apartment had just been burgled, that everything was proceeding exactly as planned. Except plans, Lorenzo had learned long ago, never survived first contact with reality. At 12:23 a.m., Marco's voice exploded through the earpiece. "Boss, we're in." The virus just activated. They plugged the drive directly into their main server. "Idiots," Tony muttered. "Give me everything," Lorenzo ordered. "Communications, financial records, client databases. I want to know everyone Russo's paid, everyone who's paid him, and every law he's broken to make it happen." The monitors filled with data, spreadsheets, emails, encrypted messages being decrypted in real time. Lorenzo's team worked with surgical precision, copying files faster than Russo's people could detect the breach. "Boss, you need to see this," Marco said, his voice tight. "Russo's network is bigger than we thought. Way bigger." Lorenzo leaned in. The screen showed a web of shell companies, fake loan agencies, and offshore accounts spanning 12 countries. But that wasn't what made his blood run cold. "That account," he said, pointing. "The one routing through the Cayman Islands to that Delaware LLC. Pull the ownership records." Marco's fingers flew across the keyboard. A document appeared on screen, a banking authorization form. The signature at the bottom belonged to FBI Special Agent Richard Dawson. "A federal agent," Tony breathed. "Russo has a federal agent on his payroll." Lorenzo's mind raced. This changed everything. Russo wasn't just a rival businessman or a petty criminal. He was running a full-scale money laundering operation with federal protection. "How much?" Lorenzo asked. Marco pulled up the transaction history. Dawson's been taking monthly payments for 3 years, roughly $40,000 per month. In exchange, he's been feeding Russo information on federal investigations, tipping him off before raids, making evidence disappear. "Keep digging," Lorenzo ordered. "I want every person in this network identified. Every transaction traced. Every." "Boss," Marco's voice was urgent. "We've got a problem. Someone just accessed the FBI's database through Dawson's credentials. They're running a search." "On who?" "Clara Martinez." Lorenzo's heart stopped. "When?"
Right now.
"Someone's pulling her entire history, birth records, employment, banking, everything." "And boss," Marco paused. "They just flagged something." A document appeared on screen, a vehicle registration form from 6 months ago. The black Mercedes Lorenzo had been driving the night of his accident. It was registered in Clara's name. "That's impossible," Tony said. "That car was registered to one of your holding companies." "It was," Lorenzo said quietly, his voice dangerous. "Which means someone in my organization changed it. Used Clara's name, probably pulled it from the hospital records after the accident." "But why?" Lorenzo stared at the document, pieces clicking into place. To create a paper trail.
To connect her to me.
So that if anyone ever came looking, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Who had access to your vehicle registrations?
Tony asked.
3 people. My lawyer, my accountant, and Lorenzo stopped. Pull up the employment records for Michael Brennan. My accountant.
Marco typed rapidly.
Brennan's file appeared. Impeccable credentials, 15 years of loyal service, access to every financial detail of Lorenzo's empire. Now cross-reference his communications with Russo's network, Lorenzo ordered. It took 30 seconds. Email chains appeared, carefully encrypted, dated back 18 months. Brennan had been feeding Russo information about Lorenzo's business operations, his offshore holdings, his legitimate investments. And 6 months ago, after the accident, Brennan had used Clara's name to register the Mercedes, creating a false connection that would make her look complicit in whatever illegal activities Russo suspected Lorenzo of conducting. That son of a bitch, Tony growled. He set her up. He set us both up, Lorenzo corrected. Made it look like Clara and I were working together, hiding assets, laundering money. If Russo or the FBI ever moved against me, Clara would go down too. His voice dropped to something lethal. Insurance. Brennan created insurance for himself by making Clara look guilty. What do we do? Lorenzo was quiet for a long moment, staring at Clara's name on that fraudulent registration form. She was already drowning in her own problems, late rent, double shifts, barely surviving. And now, because of him, because of a traitor in his organization, she was implicated in federal crimes she knew nothing about. Pull everything on Brennan, Lorenzo said. Every file, every transaction, every communication. I want proof of his betrayal airtight and documented. And then we give it to someone who can use it. Lorenzo picked up his phone and dialed a number he'd hoped never to use. Special Agent Sarah Chun, FBI Financial Crimes Division. She's clean. I've had her vetted. She's been trying to build a case against Russo for years, but Dawson's been sabotaging her from the inside. You're going to the FBI? Tony sounded shocked. I'm going to give Agent Chin everything she needs to arrest Dawson, destroy Russo's network, and make Brennan disappear into federal prison for the next 20 years. Lorenzo's expression was carved from ice. But quietly. No press, no public trials, no headlines. Just 3 men who vanish from the board like they never existed. Boss, if you go to the FBI, they'll dig into your business too. My business is clean. Lorenzo cut him off. It's been clean for 5 years. I made sure of it after Maria died, after Sophia was born. Everything legitimate, everything documented. He paused. The only dirty thing in my world was Brennan. And now he's not even that anymore. He's just evidence. Marco pulled up more files. Boss, Russo's organization is massive. If we take him down, we're talking 50 arrests, maybe more. Federal agents, accountants, lawyers. Good, Lorenzo said coldly. Burn it all. Every name on that list. I want delivered to Agent Chun with enough evidence to bury them. He checked his watch. 12:51 a.m. And I want it done before Clara wakes up tomorrow morning. What about her? Tony asked. She needs to know about the car registration, about Brennan using her name.
She will know, Lorenzo said.
But not from me. Agent Chin will contact her tomorrow as part of the investigation. Clara will learn that she was set up, that the registration was fraudulent, and that the people responsible are already in custody. You're still protecting her, Tony observed, even from the truth about how deep this goes. Lorenzo didn't deny it. On one of the monitors, he could see Clara's apartment. Dark, quiet, peaceful. She was probably asleep, completely unaware that in the last hour, her name had been cleared, her enemies identified, and a federal investigation launched that would reshape the criminal landscape of New York. All without her lifting a finger. Contact Agent Chun, Lorenzo ordered. Tell her we have a gift. And tell her that one of the conditions of receiving it is that Clara Martinez is listed as a witness under duress, not a suspect. Her name gets cleared, publicly and permanently. And if Chin doesn't agree? Lorenzo smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Then I'll burn Russo's empire myself. Less quietly. Tony nodded slowly. You know she's going to figure it out eventually.
Clara.
She's smarter than you give her credit for. I know, Lorenzo said quietly. But by the time she does, it'll already be over. She'll be safe. And whether she forgives me or not, he trailed off, watching her darkened windows. She'll be alive, Tony finished. She'll be alive, Lorenzo agreed. And in his world, that was the only victory that mattered. Clara was wiping down tables during the Tuesday morning rush when two people in dark suits walked into the diner. They had that look, federal agents trying to blend in but failing spectacularly. Everyone could spot a cop. Clara Martinez? The woman asked, pulling out a badge. I'm Special Agent Sarah Chen, FBI. This is Agent Brooks. We need to ask you some questions. The diner went silent. Every customer turned to stare. Clara's heart dropped into her stomach. What? Why? Is there somewhere private we can talk? Agent Chen's voice was professional but not unkind. Maggie appeared at Clara's elbow like a protective mother bear. She's not saying anything without a lawyer present. She's not under arrest, Agent Chen said quickly. We just need to discuss some documents that have come to light. Ms. Martinez, are you aware that you're listed as the registered owner of a 2024 Mercedes S-Class? The room tilted.
What? No.
I don't own a Mercedes. I don't even have a car. Agent Chen pulled a document from her briefcase and laid it on the counter. Clara stared at the vehicle registration form in disbelief. There was her name, her address, her signature, except that wasn't her signature. It was close, but the loops were wrong, the pressure different. I never signed this, Clara stammered. We know, Agent Chen said, and something in her tone made Clara look up sharply. Ms. Martinez, 6 months ago you were involved in a traffic accident. You pulled over to help a man whose vehicle had crashed. Do you remember that? Yes, but I don't understand what. The vehicle in question was a black Mercedes S-Class. The same one listed on this registration form. Agent Chen paused. Someone used your personal information from the hospital records to fraudulently register that vehicle in your name. You're a victim of identity theft. Clara sank onto a stool, her legs giving out. Who would do that? We're not at liberty to discuss the details of an ongoing investigation, Agent Brooks said. But we need you to come to the field office and make a formal statement. Am I in trouble? Clara's voice came out small, frightened. Agent Chen's expression softened.
No.
You're a witness, not a suspect. But this registration form has tied you to several individuals currently under federal investigation. We need to establish that you had no knowledge of or involvement with their activities. What individuals? What activities? Clara felt like she was drowning again, the walls closing in. The man you helped that night, Agent Chen said carefully. Lorenzo de Luca. What's your relationship with him? Clara's mouth went dry. He comes into the diner sometimes. I don't really know him. He's been visiting your workplace twice a week for 3 months, Agent Brooks said, consulting his notes. He paid 3 months of your rent through a shell company. That's more than casual acquaintance. How do you know about my rent? Clara's voice rose. Have you been watching me? Ms. Martinez, please calm down, Agent Chen said. We're trying to help you. But we need to understand the nature of your relationship with De Luca. Has he ever asked you to hold documents for him? Move money? Sign anything?
No. Nothing like that.
I barely know the man. Clara's hands are shaking. He just drinks coffee and leaves big tips. That's it. The agents exchanged glances. Agent Chen pulled out another document. This is a bank transfer receipt showing $18,000 deposited into your account 2 days ago. The funds originated from an account linked to Lorenzo de Luca. Can you explain that? Clara wanted to scream. The envelope. She deposited it yesterday, desperate to catch up on bills, to breathe for just 1 month without drowning. And now it looked like evidence of something criminal. It was rent money, Clara said, her voice breaking. He paid my rent without asking, and I was angry, so he gave me the money back. That's all it was. That's a lot of money for rent repayment, Agent Brooks noted. He added interest or something, I don't know. Tears burned Clara's eyes. I'm not a criminal. I helped someone after a car accident, and now you're treating me like We're not treating you like anything, Agent Chen interrupted gently. But you need to understand, the people who falsified this registration are dangerous. They used your name to create a connection between you and Aluka. If we hadn't discovered it, you could have been charged as an accomplice in money laundering, tax evasion, and several other federal crimes. The room spun. I could go to prison? For helping someone? Not anymore, Agent Chen assured her. We've verified that the registration is fraudulent. Your signature was forged, likely by someone with access to hospital records. We're currently investigating several individuals, including a Michael Brennan who worked as DeLuca's accountant. Clara pressed her hands to her face. This couldn't be happening. She just wanted to help someone bleeding in a wrecked car. How had that turned into federal agents, forged documents, and criminal investigations? I need you to come with us, Agent Chen said, standing. We'll take your statement, get your signatures verified, and begin the process of clearing your name officially. And if I refuse? Then you remain a person of interest in an active investigation, Agent Brooks said flatly. Your choice. It wasn't a choice at all. For hours later, Clara sat in a gray FBI interview room, her head pounding. She'd told them everything. The accident, Lorenzo's visits to the diner, the stalker, the rent payments, all of it. They'd recorded every word, had her sign a dozen forms, and taken fingerprints to prove she'd never touched the fraudulent registration. Agent Chen walked her out personally. You're free to go. We'll be in touch if we need anything else, but for now, you're cleared of any wrongdoing. What about Lorenzo? Clara heard herself ask. Is he in trouble? Agent Chen's expression was unreadable. Mr. DeLuca's business affairs are complicated. But I can tell you this. He's not the one who put you in danger. One of his employees did, without his knowledge. That employee is currently in federal custody. Clara nodded numbly. Outside, the afternoon sun felt too bright, the street too loud. She checked her phone. 7 missed calls from Maggie, 3 from unknown numbers. 1 text message, sent an hour ago, I'm sorry. Clara stared at those 3 words until they blurred. Lorenzo had known. He'd known about the registration, about the FBI, about all of it. And he hadn't warned her, hadn't prepared her. She dialed his number, the one from the black business card she'd kept in her pocket. He answered on the first ring. Clara. The FBI just spent 4 hours interrogating me about a car I've never seen, registered in my name by someone I've never met. Her voice was ice. Did you know? A long pause. Yes. When? 2 days ago. Clara closed her eyes. 2 days. He'd known for 2 days and let her walk into that diner completely blindsided. Why didn't you tell me? Because you were already angry at me. And because Lorenzo's voice was heavy. Because I was handling it. I wanted it resolved before you ever had to know. Handling it. Clara laughed bitterly. By letting the FBI ambush me at work? By letting me think I might go to prison? You were never going to prison. I made sure of that. You made sure? The fury rose in her chest. You don't get to make sure of things in my life, Lorenzo. You don't get to pay my bills, fix my problems, and decide what I do or don't need to know. Clara.
No.
I'm done. Her hand tightened on the phone. Whatever you think you owe me, whatever guilt you're carrying, consider it paid. Stay away from me. Stay away from the diner.
Just.
Stay away. She hung up before he could respond. On the street corner, Clara stood still, breathing hard, trying not to cry. Around her, the city moved on. Cars honking, people rushing past, the world spinning like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. 6 months ago, she'd pulled over to help a stranger. And now she was tangled in federal investigations, forged documents, and a life that felt increasingly not her own. Fix it, she'd told Lorenzo. Fix it for everyone your world hurts. He'd tried. And somehow that made everything worse. Lorenzo didn't go to the diner that week. Or the week after. He kept his distance, respected Clara's wishes, even as every instinct screamed at him to make sure she was safe. Tony's men maintained surveillance from a distance, far enough that she'd never notice, close enough to respond if anything happened. Nothing did. With Michael Brennan in federal custody, Agent Dawson suspended pending investigation, and Vincent Russo's entire network under FBI scrutiny, the immediate threat had evaporated. Clara was safe. She was also furious, betrayed, and wanted nothing to do with him. Lorenzo told himself that was acceptable. Better she hate him from a distance than die grateful up close. But late at night, when Sophia was asleep and the penthouse was quiet, he found himself staring at his phone, remembering the sound of Clara's voice breaking when she'd said, "I'm done." "You're brooding again," Sophia observed one evening, looking up from her homework. At 8 years old, she was too perceptive for her own good or his. "Just thinking, princess." "About the lady from the diner?" Sophia tilted her head. "The one who saved you." Lorenzo had told her a sanitized version of the accident months ago. A helpful stranger, nothing more. He hadn't mentioned the complications that followed. "What makes you think that?" "Because you're sad. And you're only sad about two things, Mama, and things you can't fix." Sophia put down her pencil. "Did you break something with the diner lady?" "Something like that." "Did you say sorry?" "I tried." Sophia considered this with the seriousness of a tiny judge. "Mama used to say that sorry doesn't count if you do it the easy way. You have to do it the hard way where it costs you something." Lorenzo smiled despite himself. "Your mother was very wise. So, what's the hard way to say sorry to the diner lady?" That, Lorenzo realized, was the question he'd been avoiding. The easy apology was flowers, money, words. The hard apology was something else entirely. It was truth. The next morning, Lorenzo sat in his office with his lawyer, Jonathan Price, 60 years old, perpetually exhausted, and one of the few people Lorenzo trusted completely. "You want to do what?" Jonathan asked, certain he'd misheard. "Rewrite the Mercedes registration. Put it back in my name, backdated to the original purchase. Create a paper trail showing Brennan committed fraud independently." "That's already being handled by the FBI." "The FBI's version leaves Clara's name attached to the investigation permanently," Lorenzo interrupted. "Anyone searching her background will find this case. It'll follow her forever. Job applications, credit checks, everything." He pushed a folder across the desk. "I want her name scrubbed completely. Like she was never involved." Jonathan opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. "This will cost a fortune in legal fees. And you'll have to testify that Brennan acted without your authorization, which means admitting you had poor oversight of your own accountant." "I don't care about the cost or the optics," Lorenzo said flatly. "I care that a woman who saved my life is now connected to federal crimes because my employee betrayed me." "Fix it." Jonathan studied him for a long moment. "This isn't just about debt anymore, is it?" Lorenzo didn't answer. He didn't need to. "I'll start the paperwork," Jonathan sighed. "But Lorenzo, even if we erase her name from the legal system, you can't erase what happened. She'll still remember. She'll still be angry." "I know," Lorenzo stood, looking out over the city. "But she'll be free. And that's enough." 3 days later, Clara was closing up the diner when a courier arrived with a large envelope. Inside was a thick stack of legal documents and a single handwritten note on expensive cardstock. "Clara, these are copies of the corrected vehicle registration, filed with the state and federal authorities. Your name has been removed from all records. The investigation will show that Michael Brennan acted alone in committing identity fraud, using hospital records he should never have accessed. I've also included a legal opinion from my attorney confirming that you bear no responsibility, legal or financial, for anything connected to my business affairs. This document can be presented to any employer, bank, or agency that questions your background. Additionally, I've established a trust with the funds I gave you. You can't return it. I've made it legally impossible. But you can choose what to do with it. Keep it, donate it, invest it. The choice is yours, not mine. I never meant to trap you. I only meant to protect you. I failed at both.
I won't contact you again.
Tony will maintain discreet security around your building for 6 more months, just to be certain, but you'll never see him or know he's there. After that, I'll disappear from your life entirely. You told me to fix it for everyone. My world hurts. I can't fix everything I've broken, but I can fix this. Thank you for giving me a reason to fight that night. Sophia has a father because of you. That debt can never be repaid. Lorenzo. Clara read the note 3 times, her hands trembling. Then she looked through the legal documents, page after page of corrected registrations, statements, and certifications. He'd essentially rewritten history, taking sole responsibility for Brennan's betrayal, absorbing all the legal and reputational damage himself. At the bottom of the stack was a bank statement showing the $18,000 in a trust account. Her name was on it, but so were restrictions. It could only be accessed by her, couldn't be transferred to Lorenzo or his businesses, and would revert to a children's charity if unclaimed for 5 years. He'd made sure she couldn't give it back, even if she wanted to. Clara sat in the empty diner, surrounded by documents that proved she was legally, officially, completely cleared of everything. Her name was clean. Her future was unobstructed. She was free. So, why did she feel worse? Because he did it the hard way, she whispered to the empty room, remembering something her grandmother used to say. A real apology costs the person giving it more than the person receiving it. Lorenzo had spent a fortune in legal fees. He'd taken public responsibility for his accountant's betrayal. He'd damaged his own reputation to protect hers. And he'd done it all quietly, expecting nothing in return, planning to disappear from her life entirely. That wasn't manipulation. That wasn't control. That was sacrifice. Clara picked up her phone, staring at Lorenzo's number. Her thumb hovered over the call button. Then she stopped. What would she even say? Thank you for cleaning up a mess I didn't ask to be part of? Thank you for protecting me from dangers I only faced because I helped you. There was no roadmap for this, no protocol for when the man who turned your life upside down was also the man trying desperately to set it right. Clara put the phone down and picked up the note again, reading the last line. That debt can never be repaid. He was wrong. The debt wasn't the problem. The problem was that Clara was starting to realize she didn't want it repaid at all. She wanted something else entirely, something more complicated and terrifying than simple gratitude. She wanted to understand him, to know why a man who could command federal investigations and rewrite legal documents still sat alone in a diner booth twice a week, drinking coffee he never finished. She wanted to know about Sophia, about the wife he'd lost, about the life that had made him so careful, so controlled, so desperately alone despite all his power. But wanting those things meant stepping back into his world. And his world had stalkers, corrupt accountants, and federal investigations. His world was dangerous. His world had already hurt her once. Clara folded the note carefully and slipped it into her apron pocket, right next to the black business card she'd never thrown away. Not today, she decided. She wouldn't call him today. But maybe tomorrow, or the day after. Because the hard truth was that Lorenzo De Luca had saved her life just as surely as she'd saved his, not from a car crash, but from drowning in a life that was slowly suffocating her. And that debt, that one might actually be worth repaying. Lorenzo didn't sleep the night he sent Clara those documents. He sat in his office, watching financial markets on 3 continents, waiting for the carefully constructed dominoes to begin falling. Vincent Russo's empire was built on borrowed time and stolen money. Lorenzo intended to collect both. Markets open in Tokyo in 4 hours, Marco reported, his fingers dancing across multiple keyboards. Everything's in position. Final check, Lorenzo ordered. Walk me through it. Marco pulled up a complex flowchart on the main screen. Russo's primary revenue comes from his loan operation, fake agencies that charge predatory interest rates to desperate people. He launders the profits through shell companies in the Cayman Islands before investing in legitimate businesses. Where's he most vulnerable? His credit base. The entire operation depends on continuous cash flow. If his lenders lose confidence, Marco smiled grimly. The whole thing collapses. Lorenzo nodded. And the journalist? Rebecca Hayes, New York Times Financial Crimes Division. She's been investigating predatory lending for 2 years. I've anonymously sent her complete records of Russo's loan operation. Names, addresses, interest rates, fake company registrations. Everything. When does the story run? Tomorrow morning, front page of the business section. Predatory lending ring exploits thousands. She's got enough evidence to bury him. Tony entered the office, carrying a tablet. Boss, Agent Chen just arrested 3 more of Russo's accountants. They're all cooperating. Russo's looking at 40 years minimum, maybe more. Not enough, Lorenzo said quietly. Prison is too clean, too simple. I want him destroyed first. Everything he built, everyone who trusted him, gone. That's cold, boss, Tony observed. He targeted Clara, Lorenzo replied, his voice like ice. He used a waitress as leverage because he thought it would hurt me. That's not business. That's personal, he turned to Marco. What about the stock manipulation? Marco pulled up another screen showing stock tickers for a dozen companies. Russo has significant investments in these firms, all legitimate businesses he bought using laundered money. If certain information about his ownership became public, the stocks would crash, Lorenzo finished. How much will he lose? Conservative estimate? 200 million. Maybe more, Marco hesitated. Boss, this goes beyond just hurting Russo. Innocent investors will lose money too. People with retirement funds, college savings. Then make sure Rebecca Hayes mentions that in her article, Lorenzo said. Let the public know that Russo gambled with their money using funds from predatory loans. Turn him into the villain he actually is. And Dawson?
Tony asked.
The FBI agent. Lorenzo's expression darkened. Agent Chun has the offshore account records. She'll handle Dawson quietly, no trial, just a forced resignation and disgrace. He'll disappear into obscurity where he belongs. 3 birds, 1 stone, Tony muttered. Russo, Brennan, and Dawson. All gone. 4 birds, Lorenzo corrected. He pulled up a final document, a property deed. Russo owns the building Clara lives in through a subsidiary. He probably bought it specifically to have leverage over her, to control where she lived. Tony's eyes widened. You're not. I've arranged to purchase the building through a third party. A legitimate real estate investment firm with no ties to me. Lorenzo smiled slightly. Clara will never know who the new owner is. She'll just know that her rent is suddenly affordable, the building is being properly maintained, and her landlord isn't a predator anymore. You're still protecting her, Tony said. Even after she told you to stay away. Especially because she told me to stay away, Lorenzo turned back to the screens. She deserves a life where she's not constantly drowning, constantly afraid. If I can give her that without her knowing, he trailed off. Then maybe I'll finally have repaid what I owe her. Marco cleared his throat. Boss, it's time. Markets are opening. The dominoes fell with brutal precision. At 6 a.m., the New York Times published Rebecca Hayes' exposé on Russo's predatory lending operation. By 6:30, it was trending on social media. By 7 o'clock, morning news shows were covering it. At 8:15 a.m., 3 major investment firms announced they were divesting from Russo's companies. By 9 a.m., stock prices were in freefall. At 10:30 a.m., the SEC announced a formal investigation into Russo's business practices. By noon, Vincent Russo had lost everything. Lorenzo watched it unfold from his office, tracking each collapse with clinical detachment. This was what he did, not violence, not threats, but information. The careful manipulation of data, perception, and public opinion. Russo had built his empire in shadows. Lorenzo simply turned on the lights. It's done, Marco reported. Russo's credit lines are frozen. His investors are fleeing. His legitimate businesses are collapsing under scrutiny. Everything he built is gone. And the lone victims? Lorenzo asked. Rebecca Hayes set up a victims fund. Donations are already pouring in. They'll get restitution. Maybe not all of it, but enough to help. Tony walked in looking satisfied. Just got word from Agent Chen. Dawson resigned an hour ago. Quiet agreement. He walks away, but never works in law enforcement again. His reputation is destroyed. Brennan, pleading guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. He'll still get 15 years minimum. Tony paused. And boss? That building where Clara lives? The sale went through. She's got a new landlord as of this morning. Lorenzo nodded slowly, feeling something close to peace for the first time in months.
Russo destroyed.
Dawson disgraced. Brennan imprisoned. Clara safe, her name cleared, her future secured. He'd done it. Quietly, completely, just as he'd promised himself. There's something else, Marco said, pulling up a news article. Russo's main warehouse burned down last night.
Complete loss.
Fire department is calling it suspicious. Lorenzo frowned. We didn't do that. No, Tony agreed. We didn't. Which means Russo has other enemies. People who wanted him gone just as badly as we did. Or, Lorenzo realized with growing unease, Russo wasn't finished fighting. Cornered animals were the most dangerous kind. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. The text message was simple. You think you've won. But I know where she works. I know where she lives. And if I'm going down, I'm taking everyone with me.
VR.
Lorenzo's blood ran cold. Marco, where is Russo right now? Marco's fingers flew across the keyboard. His GPS last pinged at. He stopped, face going pale. Boss, he's at the shipping docks. Your shipping docks. How long ago? 15 minutes. Lorenzo was already running for the door, Tony right behind him. Get every man we have to those docks.
Now.
Boss, what about Clara? Lorenzo's mind raced. If Russo was at the docks, if he was making a final desperate move. He's going to burn it down, Lorenzo said. Destroy my business, my reputation, everything. And if Clara is anywhere near. He didn't finish the sentence. He was already in the elevator, phone pressed to his ear, praying she wasn't working a double shift today. Praying she hadn't decided to visit the docks to confront him. Praying he wasn't about to lose the one person he'd fought so hard to protect. The call connected. Clara's voice came through, breathless and frightened. Lorenzo? Oh God, Lorenzo, I'm at the docks. There's smoke everywhere and people are running, and I don't know what's happening. The elevator felt like it was moving through molasses. Clara, listen to me, Lorenzo said, forcing calm into his voice. Get away from the buildings. Run toward the water. Do it now. But there are still people inside. The warehouse workers, they're trapped. Clara, no. The line went dead. And Lorenzo knew, with terrible certainty, that his carefully constructed victory had just turned into the fight of his life. Lorenzo's SUV screeched to a halt 3 blocks from the docks. Black smoke billowed into the afternoon sky, thick and toxic. Fire trucks wailed in the distance, but they wouldn't arrive in time. Stay with the vehicle, Lorenzo barked at Tony, already running toward the flames. Boss, you can't. Lorenzo didn't listen. He'd spent 20 years building legitimate businesses, creating something clean for Sophia to inherit. And now it was burning. But none of that mattered. Not the warehouses, not the inventory, not the millions of dollars going up in smoke. Clara was in there. He pushed through the gathering crowd of onlookers, past his own security guards trying to establish a perimeter. The main warehouse was fully engulfed, flames licking through windows, the metal structure groaning under intense heat. But the secondary building, the shipping office where workers processed manifests and customs forms, that one was only smoking. And that's where people were emerging, coughing, stumbling, eyes streaming. Lorenzo grabbed one of his foremen. How many still inside? 3, maybe 4. the man shouted over the roar of flames. We were evacuating when the second explosion hit.
Explosion?
Someone set charges, Mr. DeLuca. This wasn't an accident. They wanted everything destroyed.
Russo.
This was Russo's final move. Burn Lorenzo's legitimate business, frame him for insurance fraud, destroy everything in one desperate act of vengeance. Lorenzo scanned the crowd frantically. Was there a woman? Dark hair, about 5'6". She went back in. Another worker appeared, face blackened with soot. Some crazy lady ran inside when she heard people calling for help. We tried to stop her. Lorenzo was moving before the man finished speaking. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from a guard station, soaked his jacket with water from a burst pipe, and ran toward the smoking building. Mr. DeLuca, no, someone shouted. He ignored them. The shipping office door hung open, bent from the explosion. Inside, smoke rolled along the ceiling like a living thing. Lorenzo pulled his wet jacket over his mouth and pushed forward, squinting through the haze. Clara. His voice was swallowed by the crackling flames. A crash came from deeper inside, something heavy falling. Then a voice, hoarse from smoke. Here. We're here. Lorenzo followed the sound through the maze of offices. The heat was intense, sweat immediately pouring down his face. File cabinets had toppled, blocking corridors.
Sailing ties hung precarious up overhead.
He found them in the break room, Clara and two warehouse workers, a middle-aged man and a young woman barely out of her teens. The back door was blocked by a collapsed shelving unit. Clara was trying to move it, her hands already scraped and bleeding. Clara. Lorenzo grabbed her shoulders. What the hell are you doing here? She spun, eyes wide with shock and relief. Lorenzo? How did you? A coughing fit cut her off. Doesn't matter. We need to move now. Lorenzo turned to the shelving unit blocking their exit. It was heavy, loaded with boxes, and wedged tight against the doorframe. We tried, the male worker gasped. It won't budge. Lorenzo assessed the situation with the cold calculation of a man who'd survived worse. The shelving was metal, maybe 300 pounds. The door behind it led to a loading dock, direct access to the street. Everyone grab a section, Lorenzo ordered. On 3, we lift and push left. Ready. Clara positioned herself beside him, her shoulder pressed against his. Despite everything, the smoke, the danger, the months of anger and confusion between them, they moved together with perfect synchronization.
1, 2,
3. The shelving shifted 6 inches. Not enough. Again. Lorenzo's muscles screamed as they heaved. The metal groaned, scraped, then suddenly gave way, crashing sideways with a deafening clang.
Go.
Out now. Lorenzo shoved the workers toward the door. The young woman stumbled, and Clara caught her, half carrying her through the exit. They burst onto the loading dock, gulping fresh air. Fire trucks were arriving, police cars blocking off streets. Lorenzo's security team swarmed forward, helping the workers down from the platform. Lorenzo turned back. The building's interior was now fully engulfed. They'd made it out with seconds to spare. Clara sat on the edge of the loading dock, coughing violently. Lorenzo grabbed a water bottle from a paramedic and pressed it into her hands. Drink, he ordered. She drank, then looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. You came for me. Of course I came for you. Lorenzo's voice was rough with smoke and something else. Did you really think I wouldn't? You could have died. Tears cut tracks through the soot on her face. The building was collapsing, and you just ran in. You ran in first, Lorenzo pointed out. To save people you don't even know. They needed help. So did you. Lorenzo knelt in front of her, bringing them eye to eye. Clara, what were you doing here? At my docks. She looked away, embarrassed. I saw the news about the fire. I heard someone say it was your shipping company. And her voice dropped. Last time I ran away, you crashed. I couldn't do that again. Lorenzo felt something crack inside his chest. After everything, the anger, the betrayal, the federal investigation, she'd still come. Still run toward danger to help him. Why? He asked quietly. Because last time I did, you crashed, Clara repeated, meeting his eyes. And because she hesitated. Because I'm tired of running from the only person who's ever tried to protect me, even when I didn't want protection. Before Lorenzo could respond, Tony appeared, phone in hand. Boss, we got a problem. Fire marshal found accelerant. This was definitely arson. And surveillance caught someone fleeing the scene before the fire started.
Huso.
Worse, Tony turned his phone around, showing security footage. The figure running from the warehouse was smaller, younger. And Lorenzo recognized him immediately. Marcus Webb. He was supposed to be in custody, Lorenzo said. Posted bail 2 hours ago. Russo must have paid it. Tony's expression was grim. Boss, if Webb set these fires, if Russo ordered him to, then Russo's desperate enough to commit murder. Lorenzo stood, his mind already calculating. Get every camera feed from the docks. Webb couldn't have done this alone. He needs handlers, escape routes, payment. On it, Tony jogged away, barking orders into his phone. Clara stood shakily. Marcus Webb? The man who is following me. He works for Vincent Russo. The man behind everything. The stalking, the registration fraud, all of it. Lorenzo steadied her with a hand on her elbow. And now he's graduated from surveillance to arson. Because of me, Clara whispered. Because Russo thinks hurting me hurts you. No, Lorenzo's voice was steel. Because Russo is a coward who burns things down when he loses. But he's wrong about one thing. What? Lorenzo looked at the burning warehouse, then back at Clara, soot-stained, exhausted, her hands bleeding from trying to save strangers. He thinks destroying my business will destroy me, Lorenzo said quietly. He doesn't understand that the only thing that matters walked out of that fire alive. Clara stared at him, something shifting in her expression. You're insane, she finally said. You know that. Probably. Lorenzo allowed himself a small smile. But I'm also right. The fire burned for 3 more hours before the fire department finally contained it. Lorenzo watched from a distance, Clara sitting beside him on the hood of his SUV, a paramedic's blanket wrapped around her shoulders. $2 million in damage, Tony reported, joining them. Maybe more. Insurance will cover most of it, but boss. I don't care about the money, Lorenzo interrupted. Did you find Webb? Better. We found where he's going. Tony pulled up a map on his tablet. He made 3 calls from a burner phone after leaving the docks. All to the same number, a motel in Newark. Russo's hiding there. Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. You're sure? Credit card records show Russo checked in this morning under a fake name. But we've got facial recognition from the motel's security cameras. It's him. Clara shifted beside Lorenzo. What are you going to do? End this, Lorenzo said simply. He pulled out his phone and called Agent Chen. I have Vincent Russo's location. And evidence that he ordered arson and attempted murder. What kind of evidence? Agent Chen asked cautiously. Security footage showing Marcus Webb fleeing my docks minutes before the fire started. Phone records connecting Webb to Russo. And testimony from 4 witnesses, including myself, that Webb nearly killed people today. Lorenzo's voice was cold. That's arson, conspiracy, and attempted murder. How much time is that worth? Life, if I can prove Russo gave the order. Agent Chen paused. But Lorenzo, if you're planning to. I'm planning to give you an address and let you do your job, Lorenzo interrupted. I'm done playing games with Russo. He wanted to destroy everything I've built?
Fine.
But he crossed the line when he put innocent people in danger. He gave Agent Chen the motel address and hung up. Clara was watching him carefully. You're just going to let the FBI handle it? That's it. You sound disappointed. I sound surprised. Clara pulled the blanket tighter. The Lorenzo I've been learning about doesn't seem like the type to let someone else finish his fights. The old Lorenzo wouldn't have. Lorenzo looked at his burned warehouses. The old Lorenzo would have gone to that motel himself. Would have made sure Russo understood exactly what happens when you threaten what's mine. And the new Lorenzo has an 8-year-old daughter who needs her father alive and out of prison. Lorenzo turned to face Clara fully. And the new Lorenzo learned something today, watching you run into a burning building. That I'm insane. That some things are worth more than revenge, Lorenzo's voice softened. You risked your life for strangers. People you'd never met. And when I asked why, you said, because last time I ran, you crashed. Clara looked away. I was scared. I wasn't thinking clearly. You were thinking perfectly clearly, Lorenzo reached out, gently turning her face back toward him. You don't run from things that matter. Not from a car crash. Not from a fire. Not from me. Clara's breath caught. Lorenzo. I've been protecting you from a distance for months, Lorenzo continued. Paying your rent, clearing your name, watching over you like some guardian angel who is too afraid to actually be present. But you taught me something today. What? That protection, without presence, is just control. And I don't want to control your life, Clara. I want, he stopped, the words harder than he'd anticipated. What do you want? Clara's voice was barely a whisper. Before Lorenzo could answer, Tony's phone buzzed. He checked it, then looked up sharply. Boss, FBI just hit the motel. They've got Russo in custody. And he scrolled quickly. They found evidence in his room. Burner phones, payment records, even a written list of targets. What targets? Clara asked. Tony hesitated, glancing at Lorenzo. Tell her, Lorenzo said quietly. You were on it, Tony admitted, looking at Clara.
Top of the list.
Russo was planning to escalate after the fire. If the docs hadn't gotten him arrested, he trailed off, the implication clear. Clara went very pale. He was going to kill me. He was going to try, Lorenzo corrected. But he never would have succeeded. I would have died first. That's not comforting. Clara stood abruptly, the blanket falling away. Don't you understand? This is exactly what I was afraid of. Your world is fire and threats and federal agents. People make lists with my name on them. And you, her voice cracked. You talk about dying for me like it's romantic instead of terrifying. Clara.
No.
You want to know what I want? She spun to face him, eyes blazing. I want a life where I'm not on hit lists. Where I don't have to wonder if the man drinking coffee in my diner is secretly a crime boss. Where saving someone's life doesn't mean signing up for federal investigations and burning buildings. Lorenzo stood slowly, giving her space. You're right. My world is dangerous. It's complicated and messy, and I can't promise it won't touch you again. Then we're done here, Clara started walking away. But, Lorenzo called after her, making her pause. Your world isn't exactly safe either, is it? Clara turned back, anger and confusion warring on her face. You work 70-hour weeks for poverty wages, Lorenzo said quietly. You live in a building with broken locks and a landlord who threatens you. You can't afford healthcare. You skip meals to make rent, and you're one emergency away from homelessness. He took a step closer. You were drowning long before you met me, Clara. At least in my world, you'd be drowning in deeper water. That's your sales pitch? Clara laughed bitterly. Join my dangerous world because your regular world is terrible?
No.
My pitch is this. Lorenzo closed the distance between them, his voice low and intense. In my world, you'd never be alone again. You'd never wonder how you'll pay rent, or if you'll have enough to eat, or if you matter to anyone. You'd be protected, valued, and cherished, not because you're useful, but because you're you. Clara's anger faltered. Lorenzo. I'm not asking you to love me, Lorenzo continued. I'm not even asking you to trust me yet. But I am asking you to stop running from the one person who sees you drowning and keeps throwing you lifelines, even when you throw them back. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the distant sound of fire trucks and police radios. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice small. What if I don't know how to stop running? Lorenzo smiled, sad and genuine. Then I'll keep chasing. For as long as it takes. Tony cleared his throat awkwardly. Boss, Agent Chin wants to know if Clara will testify against Russo. They need her statement about Webb's surveillance, about the fire. Ask her yourself, Lorenzo said, not taking his eyes off Clara. She makes her own decisions. Clara looked between them, then at the smoking ruins of the warehouse, then back at Lorenzo, this complicated, dangerous, infuriating man who turned her life upside down and somehow made it better in the process. "I'll testify," she said finally. "But Lorenzo? After this is over, after Russo's in prison and Webb is convicted and everything is finished. Yes, you're taking me to dinner. A real dinner. Where we actually talk instead of you making decisions about my life from the shadows." Lorenzo's smile widened. "Is that an order?" "It's a condition," Clara corrected. "You want me to stop running? Then stop hiding. Be present. Be honest.
Be
human," Lorenzo offered. "Real," Clara said. "Just be real with me. That's all I've ever wanted." Lorenzo extended his hand, formal and old-fashioned. "Deal." Clara took it, and something shifted. A boundary crossed, a decision made. They stood there in the parking lot of a burned warehouse, holding hands like strangers making a pact, while around them Lorenzo's empire smoldered and Clara's old life continued to crumble. But for the first time in months, neither of them was drowning. They were just standing, together. And that, Lorenzo realized, was worth more than all the revenge in the world.